I'm pretty sure we are going to talk about the Steelers in this conversation. It's only a matter of time because obviously that's a big topic of conversation. But welcome back to 99 Pod. Right now, we are going to talk some NFL draft as it is tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be flipping back and forth along with the playoffs, obviously doing my best to multitask. But listen, the draft is a great night. I'm looking forward to it. And now we about to give some burning questions that we have. And Zach, I would love to start this one off. My first burning question. I'm actually going to go to Cleveland for this one because I think the Cleveland Browns, okay, not the Cavaliers, they playing, okay, in the playoffs, but a team that want to get there finally is the Cleveland Browns, obviously. And I think they definitely are the wild card because they had the number 2 overall pick. I'm hearing a lot of conversations recently about them potentially moving down. And obviously, we're going to talk about that in a few. Now, what is the Browns' vision post Deshaun Watson era? That's the question. Where are they going to go? Because clearly, this was one of correction. This is the worst trade of all times. Okay. And I think we can say that. Now, if in the future, Deshaun Watson just automatically remembers how to play the game of football again and throw for 4,000, 5,000 yards and take his team to the Super Bowl, then wake me up from my dream. But right now, this is the worst trade of all times. And the Browns have to move on. And now they have the number 2 overall pick. Obviously, they have more picks. They could have more. Obviously, we'll get to that. But barring that they keep the pick, at number 2, you got some great players that you can draft. You can go quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, right? Obviously, you may want to look over there. You know, the quarterback of the future potentially, right? Depending on how you feel that Shedeur Sanders is and how good you think he is. Obviously, there's a lot of conflicting reports about that. You got Abdul Carter, a guy that you can draft that obviously when you look at a Super Bowl contending team, obviously that's not a conversation for this team right now. But when you talk about building a championship level team, you build from the trenches. Okay. So you could look at him as well on the line. Obviously, you got Travis Hunter, you know, a guy that could be a multi-positional player, that could be a transcendent player. Clearly, they need help at wide receiver. He will make me a believer. You got him. You could be a cornerback. He could be a cornerback. Obviously, that's another topic of conversation about whether or not he will going to be playing, 2 positions in the NFL. I would love to address that soon, obviously. Now, it comes down to this, Zach. Should they trade out that pick and recoup assets? Will they? Right? How do we judge what we should do in the draft? Should we seek elite talent or should we draft capital, great draft capital? Because to me, that's a compelling debate. You know, is it better to have an elite player? Is it better to have multiple good players? Does Deshaun Watson's contract and the salary cap that's tied into the contract play a factor in them wanting to trade the pick to get multiple good players? It's going to be very interesting to see what Andrew Berry has up his sleeve and how they attempt to rebuild what has been a failed attempt at a championship. And Zach, the mic is yours.
So I definitely think you could make a compelling case that trading back is the right move for them, because when you look at this roster, I don't think they're that close right now. And a lot of that has to do with the quarterback position. If the season were to start today, luckily it doesn't, but their 2 options would be Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. I think we could both agree right now, neither one of those guys are great options. So I think they obviously have to address the quarterback position. And you could definitely make a compelling case that they should trade back, get a couple first round picks back, and really start building that roster, especially in this draft, because it kind of seems to me that the consensus opinion is obviously Cam Ward is going to go number 1. But after that, we might have to wait a little bit until we see our second quarterback come off the board. I would be pretty surprised if that's in the top 5 and maybe even the top 10. I think we're going to have to wait a little bit for that. But Cleveland's going to have to address that, obviously. So I think they could be a candidate where they trade back or maybe trade up from the second round into late in the first round to address the quarterback position. But it's the Cleveland Browns we're talking about. So anything that's logical, that we think could be logical, that we think makes sense, yeah, that probably doesn't apply to them based on their franchise's history. So I think they're going to take Travis Hunter out of Colorado with the number 2 pick. I'd be pretty surprised if that's not the case. And I just think a lot of it has to do with the fact that right now, as you mentioned, they're still recovering or trying to recover from that Deshaun Watson trade. It's an all-time bad decision. The PR around the Cleveland Browns is terrible right now. I even myself, someone who's completely neutral, I didn't really have any firm opinions or takes on this Cleveland Browns until they made that Watson trade, and I've been out on this franchise ever since. And it's going to take a long time for them to recover from that. And I think if I'm Jimmy Haslam, keep in mind this guy who was the one who orchestrated the Watson trade, he basically forced his GM's hand, saying we have to do this, we have to make a splash. He even said this offseason that the team, it was just a swing and a miss, and he regrets the trade immediately. And I don't think Deshaun Watson is ever going to play for the Cleveland Browns again. So I think in his mind, the number one step in recovering from this Watson trade is to bring in a guy like Travis Hunter, a guy that fans are going to want to see, a guy that could play both positions. At least that's the plan right now. And a guy that could just become a fan favorite. I'm not saying I agree with that logic. I'm not saying it's the right logic, but what I am saying is that I'd be pretty surprised if in about 24 hours, Travis Hunter is not a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah, I think that's going to be what it's going to be. But I will say it really depends on how they feel about Shedeur, right? And to me, I'm always going to be of the mindset of if you think that's a guy at quarterback that can be the franchise-altering player, then you go after that guy. Because think about it. We talked to Deshaun Watson. We talked about him, right? We mentioned him. How can we not? Terrible contract. The Browns are trying to, get over that post-era and move on. But you look at the time that he was a good football player a long time ago, a couple years ago. We go back there because it's hard to remember that, but he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. At one point, I was like top 5. When he got traded, the Texans looked like they was a dumpster fire. They were. They were known to be a dumpster fire. Then he left, and the assets that they recoup, they used to build the defense, but they drafted C.J. Stroud. And remember, they didn't have the Travis Hunter. He wasn't throwing to a Travis Hunter. He was throwing to a Noah Brown. Then they drafted Tank Dell, and, he became a guy. And Nico Collins became a guy, but, he was still young. And he elevated those guys. So what I'm saying basically here is if you believe that Shedeur is worthy to be a transcendent talent, then you have to draft him because he can elevate your roster until you're ready to build out that roster and add talent there. So to me, if that's what they believe and they believe that he's good, then they should draft him. If they don't believe that he's that dude, then you go Travis Hunter and you consider trading the pick if you don't want to go there.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Zach, you up.
All right. Well, this wasn't the question I was planning on starting with, but it kind of overlaps with yours. So I'm going to mention it right off the bat. And that is, who is going to be the team that trades up in this draft for a quarterback? And I don't think it's going to be into the top 10. I think Cam Ward is going to go number 1, and then we're going to wait a bit for that second quarterback to come off the board, probably somewhere in the late teens, early 20s. And I'm very curious to see what happens. I think there are a couple teams that come to mind, and as you just said, it depends on the feeling on Shedeur. What I'm reading right now, I don't think that teams are very high on Shedeur right now. I'm not saying he's going to fall out of the first round, but again, I think he's going to go somewhere between pick 17 to 22, like somewhere in that range. And I'm trying to figure out who is going to be the team that does that. You mentioned the Steelers last week. I think that is one that makes a lot of sense. If he's there for them at 21, I think they should hop on that immediately. That could be a guy that, as you just said, changes their franchise. But also I'm looking at the Browns. We were talking about them. I'm looking at the New York Giants. I think they're going to take Abdul Carter with the number 3 pick, which is fine. He's arguably the best player in the draft. You could make that case. But they got to leave the first round with the quarterback. And I'm wondering how they view these guys. You see him in our picture right now. I think Jackson Dart is going to be a New York Giant. I think that's going to be the guy that they end up going with. And it's going to be because they trade up into the first round for him. And the quarterback position, usually it's the number 1 headline, the number 1 storyline going into this draft, And of course, this year that hasn't changed, but I just feel like there's a lot of mystique. There's a lot of intrigue. We don't really know exactly where these guys are going to go. There have even been some rumors about teams trying to trade up early to go get Tyler Shuck from Louisville, I don't think he's worth a top 10 pick either. I don't even know if he's going to be a first round pick. So it kind of seems like, depending on who you read, who you talk to, there are a lot of differing opinions on who exactly the best quarterback in this draft is after Cam Ward. Some people think it's Shedeur. Some people think it's Jackson Dart. Some people think it's this kid Shuck. And it's going to depend on obviously what these teams and what these GMs think. But I'm just curious to see how much do they invest in these guys, knowing there are a lot of teams that need a quarterback, but there might not be a clear number 2 option either.
And I think that's what makes this drive very exciting to watch, because there's a mysteries. When you talk about Shedeur, mystery. When you talk about Jackson Dart, mystery. At least last year we knew that there was going to be a chance that 4 quarterbacks was going to go in the first round. We was proven to be correct. We knew who the first 2 picks was going to be off the rip, and I think this draft has a lot of intrigue and having us wondering about where these guys can go, who could potentially trade up, like you mentioned. And I think that got to be the Steelers when it comes to Shedeur, because you can't play this rating game, as I said in that clip at halftime, for Aaron Rodgers. It does not make sense. Clearly, he does not want to be there. If he was there, he would have been there. He made it known that he wanted to become a Jet immediately when he signed over there, and that happened. Tampa Bay, Tom Brady made it known immediately when he left New England he wanted to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He doesn't want to be a Steeler. They got to go and take Shedeur, and if they do, I think that will alter their plans, because they're not hard pressed to wait for Aaron Rodgers. Now, could they still sign him? Sure. I believe they only have Mason Rudolph on the roster right now, but I do think if they get Shedeur, that can change their plans and should change their plans in regards to Aaron Rodgers. As far as the Giants potentially trading back into the first round and getting a guy, I think that would be the logical move for them. That's why I don't think at 3 they should take Shedeur. I think unless they're sold on Shedeur, they take a great player, Abdul Carter. I'm hearing maybe they trade Thibodeau. We'll see, and they get their quarterback in Jackson Dart. So I do think, Zach, I want to transfer here because my next burning question is a trickle down effect of your question. This leads me to my second burning question, which is who is going to be this year's Atlanta Falcons? Because I do think that's going to be polarizing. Every year we get a team that we did not expect to draft a quarterback who drafts a quarterback. Last year was the Falcons. They signed Kirk Cousins to a $100 million guaranteed deal. We didn't think they was going quarterback. They went quarterback. They drafted quarterback Michael Penix. Very surprising to a lot of people, right? Who could be that team? And I got 2 teams that I'm looking at right now that could be in this category. The Raiders and the haters. Obviously, I'm joking. The Raiders and the Seahawks. Geno Smith is not the guy long term. All right, clearly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I understand he got a contract extension. I understand he had his best year with Pete Carroll, in my opinion. I understand that Sam Darnold had his best year as a pro last year on the Vikings. But let's come back to reality. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold. That was evident in the playoffs, okay, in playoff football down the stretch last year. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. So what becomes a long-term plan beyond these 2 stop-and-gap quarterbacks that's going to be here for a couple years? That's where you look at the Raiders. I would not be shocked if they take Shedeur. I would not be shocked. That's when you look at the Seahawks. I believe they're picking at 18. And I can see them drafting an old lineman to get Sam Darnold some help. But you don't X them out at quarterback as well. Obviously, the Raiders can go running back. Ashton Gentry is going to be a good running back, obviously. They could go wide receiver to get Sam Darnold help or, Geno Smith help at wide receiver. They could go quarterback. So to me, my question is, which team would be this year's Atlanta Falcons?
Very interesting. The more I think about it, I still can't believe the Falcons made that pick last year. And I'm not saying it's going to turn out to be a bad decision because I'm pretty high on Penix. But man, I just remember watching the draft last year thinking they just paid Kirk Cousins all this money. They're not actually going to do this, right? And they actually did. Now, it is interesting because I do agree with a lot of what you said, but I don't know if those teams do because they paid them crazy money. And I just don't know if following that Falcons formula is logical. So I don't think either one of those, I don't think any team is going to trade up heavy for a quarterback that we don't expect. I think the Giants could. I think maybe the Steelers could. But there isn't honestly really a team that comes to mind that I look at and say, okay, they're going to be a surprise team that's going to trade up for a quarterback. And I'm going to respond to your question, Will, with a question of my own that is a little bit related, but hear me out on this. Right now, if you ask me who is the team that is most likely to make a surprise pick early in the draft that we don't see coming, and I'm not saying I agree with this logic, I'm just basing this prediction on what I've been reading.
I have one
And
too.
there's been a lot of buzz about the Jaguars taking Ashton Genty with the number 5 pick. And that's very surprising to me because I just look at this roster. First of all, they have 2 good running backs, I think, in Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. We spoke a lot about the running back position last week and what exactly is the right logic when it comes to investing in those guys. And I think in certain instances, it's good. In other instances, it's not. I don't think that makes a lot of sense for the Jaguars. I don't think they should draft Ashton Genty with a top 5 pick. They have a first-year GM. That is way too big of a swing to come in with. If you're, that's going to be the first move you make. I think that's a crazy decision. I think this roster needs a lot more help. They have a lot bigger concerns in the running back position. But the more I was thinking about it, I'm like, man, this might just be a smokescreen. I think that there are other teams that might be trying to trade up into the top 5 to go and get Ashton Genty. And the 2 teams I wanted to talk about, number 1, of course, it's the Chicago Bears. We know that Ryan Poles is always on the phones. He's always trying to make big moves. We know that this offense is going to be super dependent on Caleb Williams and the rise or fall that he takes this year. We know there's a lot of pressure on him. Ben Johnson has drafted a running back in the first round before with Jahmyr Gibbs not too long ago. We know he values that position. The Bears have also invested big time in their offensive line. They have a hole at the running back position right now. I think that could be a move that makes sense, that we could see Chicago trading up into the top 5. But for me, Will, and if you ask me, what is one player and one team? What is a move you want to see that makes the most sense for both sides? And I'm going to bang the table for this. The Denver Broncos need to be the team that trades up into the top 5 or the top 10 and go get Ashton Genty, because I think that could be the kind of move that really swings things in their favor and a move that could lead them into being one of the breakout teams in the NFL this season, because we saw what this team did this past year. They made the playoffs kind of out of nowhere. It was a great story, but we've seen it many times, especially with the quarterback position, right? Sophomore slump. You want to avoid that. What are the moves you can make to avoid that? And I think getting an elite running back behind their very good offensive line with a great head coach in Sean Payton. We know that this guy could draw up good schemes for the running back position. He did it in New Orleans with Kamara and with Mark Ingram. Again, the Broncos offensive line is very good. And I just think as good of a season as they had last year, they're just still lacking a little bit of talent on the offensive side of the ball to really help Bo Nix get even better. That is the move I want to see. Denver needs to be the team that trades up and go gets Ashton Genty. I think that would be a great fit. And if they were to do that, they would be my biggest winner of the first round of the draft.
I agree with those takes that you made, every last one of them. We've been talking about the Jaguars. We've been talking about Chicago. We've been talking about obviously the Broncos, and I agree with it. I think for me, when you take a running back in the first round, something that's I won't say unconventional, because the last couple of years it has been happening, but as far as the norm and what you should do is very unconventional. I think you have to be in a position of leverage and to be able to do that, right? For example, you talk about the Lions a couple years ago when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, despite, people forget, paying David Montgomery a very expensive contract. And obviously it has worked out with their 2-man run game over the last couple of years. But they had a great offensive line. They was built in the trenches. So when they made that move in a position of strength, of leverage. Okay, yeah, if this pick fails, I still got David Montgomery. I have leverage, and I have the best offensive line. When you talk about the Denver Broncos, you have Bo Nix, you have Sean, who was great with running backs. You have Ashton, that's a very good running back. You have, a team that made the playoffs, that over exceeded expectations. They're operating in a place of strength and leverage. When you talk about Chicago, even Ryan Poles is known to make the big splash. Well, guess what? Similar to a team in their division that I just mentioned in Detroit, who built their team in the trenches, they took that. Ben Johnson is here, and he took that blueprint, build from the inside out. They are now in a position of strength and leverage where they can make a draft like that, a hefty, expensive pick, and forget about the positional value. I could take that guy and go forward with him. So I like those two teams, and I think either one of those two teams makes sense for me.
All right. Want to give out your last question?
Yeah, my last burning question that I have basically is, Zach, I'm not sure if you are in this category, and I love the draft. I love seeing these young guys and these players' lives change in front of our eyes. These guys are going from guys starving. I mean, with NIL, they're not starving in the dorm room like back in the day, right? Eating Skittles for dinner. I remember those days when I was in the dorm room eating Skittles and Pop Tarts and Cheez Its for dinner. Okay, they're not worried about that. Some of them, they already, got a lot of money, but they're going to double that with the NFL, right? But Zach, I'm not going to lie. The things I look forward to in the draft probably don't have nothing to do with the draft. It has to do with things that happen during the draft, trades. And to me, the question that I have is, should we expect trades on draft night? And I'm not talking about trading up to draft somebody. I'm not talking about trading down to recoup. I'm talking about trades with veteran players that happened during the draft. I'm talking about a potential Kirk Cousins trade. I'm talking about a potential Jalen Ramsey trade. I'm talking about a potential Trey Hendrickson trade. I'm talking about a Kayvon Thibodeau trade, potentially if they draft Abdul Carter. I'm talking about a George Pickens trade, potentially with the Steelers. I'm looking forward to that. I remember the A.J. Brown trade happened on draft night. That shook up the draft. I remember Marquise Brown happened, I believe, on draft night. It shook up the draft. And these trades sometimes take the highlight off of the actual draft because it sends the algorithms into a frenzy. So my burning question is, what trade should we expect to see on draft night?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to lie. You actually stole my take for 99 cents. I think George Pickens is going to get traded. Like, it's time. The Steelers, we've spoken a lot about them throughout the show. Mike Tomlin gave up on Antonio Brown in his prime, right? And we know how talented he was, but that was for good reason, right? We saw why that ended up happening. And as talented of a player as George Pickens is, we know he's not prime Antonio Brown. And I just remember watching the Steelers throughout last season. I was just saying enough is enough. Like I'm done with this guy. This guy is a complete head case. I just don't think he's matured. He's going to be entering his fourth year in the league. And that's not a guy I want to pay. That's not a guy I want to invest in going forward. We know that this is going to be the last year of his rookie deal. I think if you're the Steelers, I know you just traded for Metcalf, but I'm out on George Pickens. If you could get a second, third round pick back for him immediately, right now, goodbye, sayonara. That's a guy that I wouldn't be shocked to see if he gets traded. I'm curious to see where a possible landing spot would be. Green Bay is obviously one that comes to mind. Seattle, maybe another one that comes to mind. Probably a good organization with a good culture, but he's in Pittsburgh. Like, Mike Tomlin is supposed to be the guy that fixes the George Pickens prototype. He obviously hasn't been able to do that. So if I'm the Steelers, I'm saying goodbye to George Pickens. That's a guy I could see getting dealt.
Yeah, going back to that point about George Pickens, I don't know how Mike Tomlin is supposed to be the guy that fixes that when the same thing happened with Antonio Brown, Chase Claypool, with Juju. It never ends well. And that's why I do agree that this could be a potential trade on draft night. I think the Steelers have an opportunity to draft a wide receiver potentially later to replace that production. Obviously, they traded for DK Metcalf, but I do think, they already needed a wide receiver too. So if they trade Pickens, you would look for them to address that void right there. It could also be a long-term thing, right? For example, it doesn't have to happen on draft night. Remember, the 49ers a couple years ago, we knew they was going to trade one of their wide receivers, either Debo, Ayuk. It ended up being Debo. But remember, they drafted Ricky Parcell a couple years ago, and then obviously a year later they traded Debo. So it could be a situation where it doesn't have to necessarily happen on draft night, but if we do see them draft a wide receiver, the end is near.
All right. Well, my last take or my last question, I should say, for our draft segment, I'm going to go into kind of a bigger picture. And I feel like every year at the end of the regular season, and I remember watching week 18 of the NFL this year thinking, like, man, this is kind of a tough watch. There isn't really a ton that's on the line. Most of the playoff spots, most of the playoff seating was set. But there were two results at the end of the season really sticking out to me. And that was the New York Giants beating the Indianapolis Colts. You remember Drew Lock had like a career game, one of the best games we've ever seen by a quarterback. And that win propelled the New York Giants from the first pick in the draft to the number 3 pick in the draft. And then we also saw the Patriots the last week of the regular season. They beat the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo, that game meant nothing to them, but that took them from, I believe it was also the number 1 pick, but to also to the number 4 pick. So they're going to be picking 4. The Giants are going to be picking 3. And it is always the age-old question of tanking in the NFL. Does it work? Does it not work? And I think in certain instances you could say it does. In other instances you could say it doesn't. It's very luck dependent, right? You have to be at the right place at the right time. You have to find the right prospect. And a lot of it is luck. It really comes down to that. But I just feel like there's a good chance that both of those fan bases could be looking back at those pointless wins and saying, man, we really, really regretted winning those games. Kind of similar to the Dolphins a few years ago when they got hot at the end of the year with Brian Flores and they passed up the opportunity to draft Joe Burrow and they ended up with Tua. That's probably one they would like to have back. But the reason I'm saying that is I just think that Cam Ward is the real deal. And I think he is going to be a very good quarterback in this league for years to come. I think the Titans have found their guy. I think it's going to be a great pick for them if they just do a good job building around him, which I think they will. Borganzi, their new GM from Kansas City, I think he knows what he's doing. Brian Callahan, their head coach, I think he has a lot to prove, but he was in Cincinnati when they drafted Joe Burrow with that top pick. He's developed a guy from that Cam Ward prototype before. And the bottom line is Cam Ward, everywhere he's been, he's won. He's kind of the prototype of the star college football quarterback in 2025, where he's older. He's been to a lot of schools. He's transferred multiple times, but I like his background in the sense that he started his college career off at Incarnate Word. I bet you've never heard of that school, but it's a real school. That's D1, and he balled out there. He transfers to Washington State, a lower level Pac-12 school, balled out there, was very good. And then he cashes in big time at Miami and plays so well this past year that he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. He could have won the Heisman Trophy. He should have led them to the college football playoff if their defense wasn't the worst in the country. I think this kid is the real deal, and I think the Titans have struck gold with that number 1 pick, taking Cam Ward from Miami. And I think the Giants and the Patriots, we're going to look at those two teams. The Giants, I bet they're going to want Cam Ward. The Patriots, they could have traded back just one spot for a haul and still ended up with either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, who are the other 2 best players in the draft. But they're not going to end up with either one of those guys because they won that pointless game to push them out of the number 4 slot. So I'm just focusing on those 2 teams as teams that really will regret winning their games later in the regular season. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm saying it right now. I think Cam Ward is going to be a star in the NFL for years to come.
Yeah, Zach, you open up Pandora's box, and I'm going to try my best to get right to the point. The forbidden word in the National Football League is tanking. It's not forbidden in the NBA. They do it. Okay. The Utah, right? The Utah Jazz, they've been resting Laurie Marketing and company halfway through the season. Right. Cooper Flag is who we want. Same thing with Washington and all those other teams, right? The race to Cooper Flag, it's a norm, right? The race for Wemby, it's a norm, right? That's what is allowed over there. In the NFL, it was a little bit different. And to be honest with you, it's hard to tank in the NFL. I think it's impossible telling grown guys that, take a dive, to be honest with you, it's tough, right? Another thing, you know what, I'll get to that. Let me not jump. ship and put too much on my plate to remember here. But look, yes, I do agree. It's a conundrum when you talk about tanking for the better, for the future, for now, what has become the present, which is the draft. Because I look at it like, Zach, you're putting me in a box. I look at it like this. It's like a it's like going up steps, right? I'm not gonna lie. Part of my job, I'm a marketer. I walk a lot. I go up, look at people's, windows, make sure everything is good, the doors and everything. I walk up the steps a lot. Okay. And I remember walking up the steps yesterday, in a undisclosed location. I'm not gonna put too much information out there. And I'm walking up these steps. I'm like, God damn. Uh, I'm young. I'm like, about to be pushing 30, right? TMI. My birthday today, getting closer than I was yesterday. Okay. And I'm like, how do people that's 85 that live here, how are they doing it? Going up and down the steps. Lil, where you going here? My point is, we make decisions based on the now that fits us now, right? Sometimes pride is involved. This house, I love it. Yeah, sure. I forget about the steps later on, right? I ain't gotta worry about that right now, right? Because guess what? The house is beautiful, right? And I got pride. I want it now. I worked hard 40 years, slaving out here on the plantation just so I could be able to have 10 years of relaxation. I'm gonna buy this house right now. But what you failed to realize is that when you get older and you're 80 years old, you got to go up and down them steps, and you're not gonna want to do that, buddy. So I look at it like that when it comes to tanking. Yeah, sure. I have pride, right? It's a grown man's game, right? But at the end of the day, winning that game, what is that going to do for you come today, draft night, when you have to trade back, not trade back, well, potentially, depending on what the Patriots do, but you got to take another player and try to trade back up if you're the Giants to get a quarterback when you could have got the best quarterback in the draft had you lost a game that really didn't do nothing for you then. And it's damn sure not going to do nothing for you now. I mean, we've seen it. Even with the Jets, your Jets, even though Trevor Lawrence is not, transcendent, they won a game against the Rams. Sam Darnold had his best game prior to, obviously, the season he had last year. They won that game, and then they had Zach Wilson that they settled for. And where's Zach Wilson? He's now on the Jets. He's actually on a jet to Denver. He's there now, by the
He's
way.
actually in Miami.
Well, he's on a jet back to Miami. He's there now. Okay. So my point is, you got to do what's best for the organization going forward. And that's why I think the Giants are definitely the most polarizing team in this draft, because they're in a position where guys' jobs are on the line. They're coaching for their jobs, and all they're going to do what's best for the team going forward. Clearly, they did not do that when they won that game. And I think that could definitely bury Brian Daboll and Joe Sheen's job in the future.
Yeah. And it really just hit me thinking about it like, man, because the Patriots are tough because I do think they really need a right tackle. And I think Will Campbell from LSU is probably the most likely pick. But anyone you talk to says the two best players in this draft are Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, and they're going to get neither one of those guys. And they could have maybe traded back one spot. We know, like, if Cam Ward was actually available, like, and the Titans said, obviously, they're not going to trade back. It's looking like they're going to take him. But if the Patriots had the first pick and that was open for business, they could have gotten a haul back. They really could have, which could have really accelerated their rebuild. And I just think also, too, that was a unique situation because remember, they fired Gerard Mayo right after they won that game. I almost wonder if Mayo went into that game knowing he was going to get fired and kind of just did it as a middle finger to the organization, saying, all right, you're going to fire me after 1 year. I'm going to win this game for no reason and set us back a few spots in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's why winning those games is not always the best case long term, because he wasn't even there to celebrate that victory if he didn't do it intentionally. Like, he lost his job. He got fired. What did that game do for you, Mr. Mayo? What did that game do for the Patriots? Sure, they had a very good, a decent free agency, but they could have won free agency clearly if they had that pick that was able to trade out of that pick for a hungry quarterback needy team. And that's why I do think when it comes to tanking, there's always going to be a big debate. I don't think we will ever have an answer for that in the near future because of the sport and how passionate and physical this sport is. But it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. And if you remember too, Joe Milton was their quarterback in that game. And you remember everyone saying like, oh, this guy, he's pretty intriguing. Like, could they maybe, trade him and get something back? It turned out they did. He ended up going to Dallas, but they were so mad about winning that game. They fired the coach and traded the quarterback that won the game.
Literally. And these teams got to pay. They're going to pay for it on draft night, barring that they don't luck out like the Texans did when they won a game they wasn't supposed to win, and they got CJ Stroud, and guess what? They're saying it loud. They're happy. But that wraps up a conversation about the NFL draft without burning questions because it's going down tomorrow. All right. So it's going to be a lot of multitasking, obviously, watching the game and watching the draft. Zach, I'm going to be looking forward to recapping the draft next week.